Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our fifth installment of the Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame. We're happy to be with you today, and setting up on the stage here with me is a group of guys just like me who not only love athletics and sports and sporting events, but we love the history of it. And I think that's how we kind of got started with this, just over some conversations of past players and past teams. So that's kind of how we've got to where we are. So on behalf of the Muhlenberg County High School, Muhlenberg County Athletic Department, and the Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame, I welcome you to today's event. And first, we're going to go with our invocation by Miss Tanner Robards, who's a swimmer for our MCHS Mustang swim team. Several records she holds. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll be mentioning her name up here. Tanner?
My name is Tanner Robards, and I just graduated from Muhlenberg County High School. I'm honored to be here today. As a member of the golf and swim team, along with being involved in many clubs and extracurricular activities, I know the hard work that goes into being a student athlete. At this time, please bow your head and let's pray. Lord, thank you for the blessing of this beautiful day as we are here to honor the members of the Hall of Fame. Thank you for blessing each and every one of them with the gifts and talents they were given to glorify your name and influence our community. Allow them to give all the glory to you. We love you and we thank you for everything you do for us. Amen.
Real quick, let me introduce our Hall of Fame staff up here. I'm Jerry Hancock, Athletic Director here at the high school. We have Mr. Dean Rowe, Mr. Freddie Mays, Mr. Mark Bowers. Also not in attendance with us today is Mr. Eddie Lewis, who's on vacation, and Mr. Brad Devine, who had other obligations at this time. So I hope you enjoy our program this afternoon as we get started. Thank you.
As far as how the Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame came about, as Jerry alluded to, this idea had been percolating really for a lot of years after we held what were called the first Legends Games. Those were held in the early 2000s. That event was very well received and continued for several years. And truly, the consolidation of Muhlenberg North and Muhlenberg South High School sort of paved the way to have one high school with a shared history in athletics. And that sort of paved the way for this actually to come about. And in 2016, our inaugural class was inducted. And Jerry mentioned and introduced the members of the staff, or of the directors of the Hall of Fame, all volunteers. No one is paid to do anything. But one thing I think that I would say is that we're all fans of the game. Several of the people up here were athletes themselves, but as far as being, accomplished in any sports, with the exception of Brad and Freddie, probably the rest of us were journeymen. Jerry, great success in cross country and basketball and other things, but I think we would all describe ourselves mainly as fans, and that's kind of what drives us to help support this effort. Mr. Bowers over there, Mr. Mustang, as he's lovably called, one of the great knowledgeable basketball historians in our community. Brad Devine, a former coach at Muhlenberg North and AD at Muhlenberg County High School. Jerry as well. Dr. Mays, as we talked about, outstanding player at Central City High School, retired optometrist and supporter of our community in so many ways. Eddie Lewis, a great multi-sport athlete at Bremen High School. And for my part, I've been blessed to be the public address announcer at Muhlenberg North and Muhlenberg County High School for the past 30 years, which gave me a great seat in the house to appreciate a lot of the wonderful moments and teams and our great athletes. I think we're fair-minded, I think fairly knowledgeable, but the reason behind this is that Muhlenberg County athletics and the accomplishments that have been made deserve to be recognized, and they deserve to be memorialized with this great Hall of Fame. This is our fifth induction class out of 100-year history, 100-plus year history in athletics. There are still so many people worthy of induction that have not gone in. And in time, I think that beautiful wall of fame that we have there at the high school is going to be completely filled and going to need to be expanded. And that's a great, great thing. We want to connect to this present with our past. We want our young athletes to walk down that hall and see those who have come before, what has been accomplished and what is possible for them. And we want these stories to live on. So without further ado, we're very proud to celebrate the class of 2020.
The first induction into the 2020 Hall of Fame class, Muhlenberg County Sports Hall of Fame, is the Central City High School Golden Tide team from 1950. Coached by Delmus Gish, the 1949-50 Golden Tide finished with a 29-5 record and advanced to the semifinals of the Sweet 16. Only two other CCHS squads in the school's illustrious history managed to do as well. The trio of juniors, Bobby Knopfsinger with 450 points, and Joe Mack Howard, 413 points, and senior Marion Tinsley, 391 points, combined for 1,253 points that season. The season included a win over Cliff Hagan and the defending state champion Owensboro Red Devils. The Tide beat Greenville 51-40 to win the district title, and in the regional championship, Tinsley scored 22, and Knopfsinger added 18 to drive CCHS to a convincing 85-50 win over Litchfield. In the state tourney, they defeated Tompkinsville 60-51 in the opener, behind 22 points by Howard. Next, Knopfsinger had 15 to lead CCHS past Campbellsville 45-41 in the quarterfinals. However, they would fall 59-55 to Clark County in the semis and drop a narrow 71-69 decision to Corbin in the consolation game on Roy Kidd's half-court bomb at the buzzer. Howard earned a spot on the all-tournament team. Speaking on behalf of the CCHS 1950 Golden Tide basketball team is Corky Withrow, a legend in his own right, a 1956 graduate of Central City High School, All-American, all-everything. Corky Withrow, thank you, Corky.
Talking about the 1950 Central City Golden Tide, you have to think about Joe Mack Howard, Bobby Knopfsinger, Marion Tinsley. This was a time when I was on the B team at that time, and I used to see them. We'd sit there all afternoon to get to play a few minutes, but we got to see them practice and see Bobby Knopfsinger and Joe Mack Howard actually run from one end of the court to the other. And there was a Coke machine on the other side of the wall. There was a mat there. They didn't care anything about making the goal. All they wanted to do was knock over the Coke machine. And we got a big kick out of that, but they were fantastic players to watch. And Joe Mack, he crossed the center line and let it fly. he was known to be a shooter, and Knopfsinger he could leap. He was one of the best leapers Central City's ever had. And Tinsley, the one thing I remember about Marion Tinsley is the way he shot a free throw. And I don't know if anybody can remember the same way I do, but he shot it underhanded with a spin. I've never seen anybody do that before or after, but Marion was good at it. He made a lot of free throws. But that 50 team, they showed their stuff. They were tough. And Joe Mack, I just remember Joe Mack firing one-hand jump. There was not many jump shots back in those days. So most of them was set shots and under the bucket putbacks, and they were really good at what they did, and they were great in the state tournament. They finished fourth, and proud of Central City. They also were very instrumental in my becoming a basketball player, and most of the guys on that team are gone now, but I hope being in the Hall of Fame as a team that the Central City fans that remember and some that don't remember will honor this ball club till the end of time. They were wonderful to watch, and they were big time, I'm going to tell you.
I guess the thing that stands out to me the most about that team, of course, and all these teams predate, my generation, but how close we've been to a state championship in that 1950 team. They were loaded. Just, to face Clark County in a 4-point game, then lose the consolation, on a half-court bomb. It just sort of illustrates the history of where our teams that have made it have been, that we've come so close, and this team came as close as any of them.
That's true, Dean, and you said they were loaded. They had shooters. They had Joe McHoward, the outside shooter. Had inside guys like Tinsley and Nossinger outside and could drive. Nossinger was a driver, great athlete, could jump over, was probably about 5'8" or 5'9", and could dunk with both hands. You know, great athletes, all of them. You know.
Our next inductee for the class of 2020 for the Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame is Mr. Legan McDonald. Leslie Legan McDonald was born August 31st, 1935 in Muhlenberg County. He was a 1954 graduate of Greenville High School and a veteran of the U.S. Navy. Most of his working career was spent at WNES Radio in Central City, beginning as a disc jockey and retiring as the general manager of both the Leader News and Paragon Printing. A longtime member of the Kentucky Broadcasters Association, McDonald was the radio voice of Muhlenberg County basketball for over 30 years, broadcasting hundreds of local high school games over 4 decades. An avid photographer, many of McDonald's photos also grace the pages of the Leader News. He also had a distinguished career of service over his lifetime, earning the Melvin Jones Fellowship Award, the highest form of recognition bestowed by Lions Club International. In addition, Legan McDonald served as a fireman with the Greenville Volunteer Fire Department for over 50 years, receiving the Gold Lifetime Member Badge for his dedication. Legan McDonald. And offering comments on behalf of Legan's legacy is Mr. Stan Barnett.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Legan today. You know, Legan was a broadcaster here at WNES for from the 50s, upper 50s, I guess, to almost the mid-90s before he retired. He did games, I believe, up until about the mid-80s. And what I would want to say about Legan is he was really a professional in every sense of the word. He was always prepared for games that he did. In fact, I can remember years ago him being in his office during a game day and doing his lineups before he ever got to the gym. So that's how much he was prepared to do a ball game. And you have to realize also, when you're doing games like this wasn't his main job. I mean, his main job, he was a station manager here for years. So he worked 8 to 5, go home a little bit, then go to the game. So that made for a very long day. So you have to have a dedication to be able to do that. He was dedicated to basketball. He loved basketball, had a passion for basketball. He had a passion for the players. I mean, he loved the players, the coaches, the parents. I mean, he really knew everybody pretty much, you know, in the county. And he, with the 7 high schools that we had here, of course, he really knew everybody. So mainly the games that he was doing was Muhlenberg County games. We would have like games of the week where we do one on Tuesday and Friday. So all the Muhlenberg County schools were pretty much involved in it. And one thing that I noticed when he would do Muhlenberg County games, of course I wasn't with him the whole time, but I mean in his latter years, he never really showed any favoritism toward one school or the other. I realized he was a Greenville High School graduate. I'm sure he had some feelings for that, but he never really showed any favoritism unless we played in a regional tournament or something like that. Then he would go out and he'd be a different story. He might show a little favoritism then when he was doing a Muhlenberg County school facing another county school. And he told me a story one time in the 60s about the heated rivalry between Greenville and Central City, which was very, very heated. And it's a game involving the Central City Golden Tide and the Greenville Blackhawks. I believe at that time Central City was ranked highly in the state. They went to Greenville to play Greenville High School, and Greenville upset Central City that night. Well, the story behind that is that the players cut down the nets after the game. And I'd never heard of that before, after, or since. But that's how much rivalry you had there. You'd see actual Greenville players cut down the nets after a regular season game after they upset Central City. So that was a pretty big thing. What they also wanted to mention, one time, you know, back in the early 80s, we bought some brand new equipment here at the station. It was top of the line, and we were really proud of it. The very first night that Legan took it to a ball game, he dropped it down some steps, went across the parking lot, and believe it or not, it didn't damage the equipment any. It made some dents in it, but never damaged it. But we never really let him live that particular situation down. That was pretty amazing there. But anyway, what I also wanted to say was that you have to realize that, especially during the regional tournament, the broadcasters like Legan and everybody, we celebrate the teams when they win. I mean, we're kind of a part of that group in a way. And when they lose, we also feel the pain, especially when we know it's a senior's last game or whatever. I mean, we feel those emotions like some of the players do. That's one thing that we do. But I know the league will be very proud, be humbled, and be honored by receiving this award with the Hall of Fame. And I just want to give him some credit for all the work that he did here in Muhlenberg County. A lot of people knew him. He knew everybody. I think he loved everybody and really cared about everybody. And I just want to thank him for that.
Ligon McDonald.
Oh, Jerry Goldberg. Yeah.
Ligon, the thing I remember about him growing up, of course, at Muhlenberg Central, a lot of times, because we had a nice setup, I guess, we got to be the game of the week several times. I thought he was like Howard Cosell. Of course, I was a young kid. I guess didn't know very, but I loved it when he came in. He was always so friendly, and I just thought he was a star. I just thought he was a star because he did Muhlenberg County basketball. That's one of my fondest memories from when I played.
He was definitely the voice of Muhlenberg County. I mean, when you turn on the radio right before the game and you hear Ligon, you know where you are, and you know what's going on. And it's he was the voice. There's no doubt about it.
He did a nice job calling the games. I mean, just
He
he
did.
kept it, on the players and that sort of thing. I can remember being even interviewed, with after ball games and that sort of thing. Always a gentleman, and
Always a gentleman.
and never prejudiced in anything
No.
we talked about. He was for all the Muhlenberg County sports, which was a lot of fun. And
Ligon was, he's arcade with Ledford. When I think back about broadcasting, and Ligon's actually our first inductee that really is in that genre of contributor as someone who was kind of a fixture in local athletics, and just such a great man away from athletics, but his career, again, you're talking about pieces of 4 decades of being that go-to person for Muhlenberg County basketball. Again, just a great legacy, and I think we're proud to honor him this way.
And Dean, you hit on just real quick. Ligon was such a generous man.
Oh.
He was such a man of giving. And I think that's one of the things I loved about it, because before the games, he would always talk to you, be friendly. But with his work with the Lions Club, the fire department, the newspaper, and always doing games, he was all about giving. And I think that's one of the things I'll always remember about Ligon. So.
And toward the end of his life, there was many games he would come down to the scores table and sit by us down there, Dean.
He would.
And he would, during timeouts, he would tell some stories, about what happened, some games that he called, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed being around him.
I think it says a lot about him also, the fact that the photograph that was chosen to be on his plaque, to be a part of, the history of our athletic Hall of Fame, his family chose him being a volunteer fireman. He was very proud of 50 years, as being a member of that volunteer fire department. So a guy that served his community in a lot of different ways, I think that speaks volumes for the kind of person he was, the character he was, that was very important to him.
Yeah, I agree.
Our next inductee is Lance Gish. A 3-year starter, Lance Gish averaged 24.1 points a game for Central City in his senior year of 1959, which included a career-high 41 points against Hartford. His 1,817 career points is tied for 5th all-time in Golden Tide history. The 6'1" guard and son of legendary CCHS head coach Delmas Gish was a consensus All-State pick, earned all LIT honors, plus made the All-District and All-Region teams. In Coach Jack Day's first season at the helm of the Tide, Gish poured in 30 points to lead Central City to the regional championship by defeating Beaver Dam 71-58. CCHS would fall to Louisville Manual in the opening round of state tourney, with Gish scoring 25 in his final game to earn all-state tournament honors. Gish went on to play collegiately at Vanderbilt University. Lance Gish. Offering personal comments about Lance Gish is longtime friend, classmate, and teammate Jack Simpson.
My name is Jack Simpson. I graduated in 1959 from Central City High School with Lance Gish, and I want to talk about Lance today. I've known Lance since 2nd grade. He was always a good ball player. And I remember in our sophomore, junior, and senior year, he started as a sophomore while I was on the B team. And he led the 1959 team to a 32-5 record. We were tied with Manual in the state tournament at halftime, but they beat us in the second half by 12 points. They just wore us down. I've always been suspicious of how Central City seems to always draw the winner of the state tournament. Lance went on to have a great career at Vanderbilt, and he was just an amazing guy all around. He had a great jump shot. He also had a nice one-handed set shot before they had threes. He would have had a lot more points had they done that. One of the things I remember about Lance is non-basketball. It was after he left Vanderbilt, graduated, and became president of a bank. Lance one day was in the bank and somebody came in and robbed it, held it up, armed robbery with a gun. They took a hostage and was going to leave, and Lance said, "No, wait, I'll trade places. Let me be the hostage." And he did. That took a lot of nerve. Not everybody would have done that. It just indicates the kind of character that Lance had. Thank goodness it turned out okay. The police ran him down, caught him, and they were about to get Lance, thinking he was in on the robbery until he explained who he was. So he had a great career. Just can't say enough about him. Led the team and started, like I said, all 3 years. So that's it. And I'm very pleased that Lance is going into the Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame. He is well deserved. That's it.
On Lance Gish, of course, Lance kind of predates my his playing career predates my time here on earth, but I heard a lot of the stories. Of course, one of our first athletes to go SEC, as well.
Yes.
And I think, the pressure of playing as a coach's son, I think, number one, it's always a double-edged sword because I think coaches' kids are typically students of the game, kind of have that coach on the floor mentality and ability, as a lot of people do. But the pressure of playing for your dad, especially when your dad's Delmas Gish,
right.
I think what he accomplished was amazing.
Incredible.
No doubt about it.
Our next inductee for the class of 2020 is E.A. Diddle. Edgar Allan Diddle was born on a small farm near Gradyville in Adair County on March 12, 1895. He developed into a fine athlete and played all sports at nearby Columbia High School. In 1915, Diddle entered Center College at Danville, where he played basketball and football, earning the nickname Mule for his great physical strength on the gridiron. After 2 years in the Navy, Diddle returned to finish his career at center and landed his first head coaching job at Monticello High School in 1920, taking his first team all the way to the state finals. The next year, Diddle assumed the head coaching position at Greenville High School. In his second year in Muhlenberg County, his 1922 team posted a 26-2 record and participated in a regional tournament in Bowling Green after a flood or fate prevented the team from traveling to their scheduled site in Owensboro. Diddle so impressed everyone with his coaching ability that Western Kentucky officials extended an offer to him to become the athletics director and head coach of all sports at the college. He eventually accepted, and on September 7, 1922, for the salary of $150 a month, that's $100 less than he was offered to stay at Greenville, E.A. Diddle began his legendary career at Western Kentucky University. He retired in 1964 as the winningest collegiate basketball coach of all time with a 42-year coaching record of 759 and 302, the great E.A. Diddle. And offering some great remarks and insight for Coach Diddle is Mr. Paul Just.
Mr. Diddle came to Western Kentucky University from Greenville High School in 1922 to coach basketball, baseball, and football. 42 years later, he retired as the winningest coach in the history of college basketball with 759 victories. He began his career at Monticello High School in Kentucky, where he took that team, the 1921 team, to the state semifinals of the state tournament. However, after that year, for whatever reason, he was out of a job. Then he got a call from a doctor in Greenville, an acquaintance he had made at Center College, who offered him the Greenville coaching job. He took that job in 1922 and that team went 26-2 and earned a berth in the Owensboro Regional. However, the Green River was flooded, the ferries weren't running, so GHS was sent to Bowling Green instead. Greenville lost in the first round. However, Diddle took over for the Adairville coach who had become ill and coached Adairville to that regional championship. At the time, Western was looking for a coach. They decided they were interested in E.A. Diddle. He was interested in Western, but the big problem was Greenville was paying him $250 a month, and Western was only going to pay him $180 a month. Finally, he was told that if you take this job, you'll never regret it, and somehow I think he believed that. He accepted the job, and he never regretted it. The year at Greenville High School opened doors for Edgar Allan Diddle that took him to a place as one of the great coaches in college basketball history.
And what was the story about Diddle, even though Greenville did not advance to the state tournament? Another school, like, was it Russell, Logan County or somebody?
Glasgow.
Adairville,
yeah.
Adairville that same year, their coach somehow had an illness or something that came up, so they asked Ed Diddle to take that team, so he actually coached in the state tournament that year, but not for Greenville.
Right, for Adairville.
Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Strange thing.
But it's, I think a lot of people, and this is one of those inductions that I think is the neat thing about our Hall of Fame. Because listen, we go into this process every year with names we're all familiar with and names that you think that's the connection. I watched this person play, I heard about this person play. A lot of people don't know that connection with Muhlenberg County and one of the legendary, NCAA basketball coaches of all time. And I've known that story for a while. I think most of you have. But having that connection to Greenville and but for fate, of coaching, at the right place at the right time, he may have retired as Ed Diddle, one of the greatest high school coaches of all time, but certainly worked out pretty well for Coach Diddle. And anyone who goes and plays in Diddle Arena nowadays kind of gets the breadth of what that is.
Ed Diddle ties a lot of stuff together. He broke Fall Gallen's record, and then Adolph Rupp broke his record. Dean Smith broke his record, broke Rupp's record, and then Bob Knight broke Dean Smith's record. Mike Krzyzewski, of course, broke Bob Knight's record and is now the all-time winningest coach. Adolph Rupp played for Fall Gallen at Kansas back in 1922.
Oh, my.
I think that's one thing, and Paul may have alluded to this in his comments, but actually when Diddle retired, he was second, all-time wins. But and give Kansas credit, they kind of fessed up years later that they had incorrectly calculated wins for Fall Gallen.
Right.
And they adjusted that, and as it turned out, Coach Diddle retired as the winningest, coach of all time. So, just a great story, great connection to Muhlenberg County. And again, we're talking about the early part of the 20th century. Basketball really still in its infancy in so many ways. And again, to have a great name like Coach Diddle associated with Muhlenberg County and certainly our Hall of Fame is a neat thing.
Every time I think of Ed Diddle, I think of the red towel. Just amazing that he got them, they created a tradition there. It's still there.
Yeah.
And the fact that is carried on at Western today. You go to a ball game, whether it's basketball or even football, they've got those red towels. So that's a nice tribute to what he meant to that university and its standing across the nation.
And growing up, did you not think of Diddle Arena almost as Madison Square Garden when you got to go there?
Yes.
Because it was huge at that time. And it's
think the record
it's an
crowd was over
icon
15,000.
in Kentucky.
The next inductee into the 2020 Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame class is Gary McDonald. A 1963 graduate of Greenville High School, Gary McDonald was a tremendous two-sport athlete. On the hardwood, he scored 1,565 points in his 3-year varsity career for the Blackhawks. McDonald averaged 13.8 points a game as a sophomore, 16.6 as a junior, and 22 per game during his senior campaign. That season, McDonald shared Muhlenberg County Player of the Year honors with his teammate, Melvin Van Hooser. The duo led the Hawks to the 16th District Championship with a 29-4 record. McDonald was also a great baseball player, playing on 3 district championship teams and 2 regional runner-up squads in 1961 and 1963. He was a 3-time all-county pick as both a standout pitcher and shortstop. McDonald earned a dual scholarship in both sports to Belmont College in Nashville. His greatest impact for the Bruins was on the pitching mound as a 3-time All-VSAC performer and a 2-time Most Valuable Player. His career ERA of 1.66 has remained the program standard for over 5 decades. In 1965, he threw only the second no-hitter in Bruins history. McDonald was inducted into the Belmont Athletic Hall of Fame in 1991. Congratulations to Gary McDonald. Speaking on behalf of Gary McDonald, to share some personal comments is John Rowe.
I've been asked to speak a few words about Gary McDonald. Gary played high school baseball and basketball. He was a starting shortstop on the baseball team, starting guard on the basketball team. He was captain of both teams. He led the basketball team to the semifinals of the region, and he led the baseball team to the semifinals of the region. There wasn't much Gary could do. Like I said, he played shortstop, was a great glove man. He was a great ball player all around. But more important, he was a great individual. If you had a problem, Gary knew about it. More often than not, rather than you have to go ask him for help, he came to you, seeking you out, offering to help. He married his high school sweetheart, Alita Shields, and they stayed married till Gary passed away, I think it was 3 years ago. When Gary left Greenville, he went to Belmont College, played basketball there. I've been told that Gary is in 3 Hall of Fames in the state of Tennessee. They're now going to add him to the Hall of Fame here. This is an award that is long overdue, and he deserves it.
I was in talking to John about Gary. One of the things John kept talking about was not only was he a great athlete, great player, great teammate, he was an even better person.
Oh, he's a good guy.
And that's the one thing I think it impressed me. All the numbers stuff just blow you away. But when you're still humble and it's a great all-around person, along with all that, that's kind of the full package.
My recollection of Gary McDonald goes back to being the youngest sibling in my family. My brother Jerry graduated the same year that he did. And so they played against one another in basketball, but played with one another in American Legion baseball. And American Legion baseball at that point was huge.
Oh, it's real
and so I
big.
got to tag along to be around those guys. And he and Melvin Van Hooser were just, they were really great for me to be around. And you all, I think Mark maybe shared this before, but there was a really nice story about Gary and Melvin being co-MVPs that year. I think together they averaged like 43 points per game. And then one game during the season, Melvin turned his ankle in the first minute of the game, and he left having scored 2 points. Gary McDonald scored 41 that night and still maintained that average of 43 between the two of them. Although what a great story that is.
It was a good story, yeah.
I think, it comes to mind, that Muhlenberg County MVP honor was a great honor.
It was.
Kind of like what you were alluding to, Jerry, with, that was during the 7-team era.
Yeah.
Where you just beat up on each other all year. And I can remember, district tournaments waiting to see who was going to get that voting and be awarded the MVP. And for 2 guys on the same team to share the award, I think speaks, great. And something else that comes to mind, we face the challenge, every year of just trying to gather statistics in support of, of this. And again, you can, on the college level, there weren't a whole lot of statistics available really for Gary's career. We managed to find certain things to support, like the ERA record and things like that. But certainly on the high school level as well, it's even more difficult. So certainly by reputation, by just historical knowledge is the way we approach a lot of these selections. But Gary certainly, stood out, and to stand out so greatly in 2 sports and to excel in baseball as he did in college, just tremendous. And that Belmont connection, that was one of the first of the Belmont connection athletes from Muhlenberg County to that school. Yeah. Our next inductee for the Hall of Fame class of 2020 is R.C. McElwain. A 1957 graduate of Hugheskirk, Raymond Clay R.C. McElwain played his first 3 years for the Dunmore Wildcats until that school closed in 1956. He tallied 1,725 points during his amazing prep career as he averaged 20 points a game as a sophomore, 23.7 as a junior, and 25.6 points in his senior season. McElwain is one of only 3 male players in Muhlenberg County history to average over 20 points a game for 3 consecutive years. He is also one of only 3 players to score 50 or more points twice in a single season, pouring in 55 versus Kyrock on February 23, 1956, and another 50 against a Tennessee squad that same season. Only Corky Withrow and Patrick Sparks have matched the feat. McElwain was a 3-time All-County pick, a 2-time All-District pick, and a 2-time All-West Kentucky selection. The great R.C. McElwain. And offering his thoughts on the great career of R.C. McElwain was his high school teammate, Mr. Jerry Posey.
Hello, I'm Jerry Posey. In our rich and colorful basketball history of Muhlenberg County, there have been many great basketball players. R.C. McElwain was not only great, he was super great. I had the honor of playing with R.C. our senior year at Hugheskirk, so I can tell you how great he really was. I could tell you he was a great rebounder. Outside, he was a great long-range shooter. Inside, at 6'6", he was unstoppable, scoring 51 points in a single game. But I think his greatest tribute came from a coach that coached in Muhlenberg County, one of the greatest high school coaches ever to coach in the state of Kentucky, Coach Dylan Skish. Hugheskirk was victorious over Central City twice our senior year, and Coach Gish told me in these exact words. He said, "If I had you boys, we'd win the state tournament." Of course, he was referring to R.C. McElwain. Quite a tribute to R.C. from Coach Dylan Skish.
Mark, I'm going to defer to you here. You probably knew
Yeah,
it
you
best.
have a, yes.
Let me
RC.
ask a real quick question, because as I've been sitting there listening to this, during the mid to late 50s, early 60s, and I know we had 7 schools, but it seemed like there was 3 schools that stood out for the most part. And I'm sure that other schools had good seasons during that time, but it seemed like Central City, Greenville, and Hugheskirk during that time, pretty much, my gosh, they must have had some wars, the powerhouses. And if RC did not get Player of the Year, the 2 years that we're talking about,
Then
who was the Player of the Year those years?
Player of the Year was picked before 1962. You know, 62 was when the Leader News started.
Was that the first year?
Yeah, they started sponsoring that trophy, you know, the award. But Players of the Year in the county was selected by the coaches, and that went back, I'm thinking, to the early 50s. I know, of course, Corky won that a couple of times. I think Carl Carver from Hugheskirk won it at least once, maybe twice. You know, different guys down through the years. Not for sure, about 57. I have to go back and look at that a little closer. RC was right up there. He was second in the county in scoring that year. There was a guy from Graham that beat him out just by about a half a point. And RC was about 6'5", 6'6", weighed about 220, 225, strong, good outside shooter, could post up, you know, had a good hook shot. Of course, hook shots were, you know, the going thing then. RC had a good hook shot. And like you said about another fellow a while ago, Gary McDonald, RC was a better person than he was a player, and he was an outstanding player. And the first time I ever met RC was back in the middle 90s. And the very first time I met him, I thought I'd known him forever. He was that kind of guy. He just made you feel at home, just, you know, just like you were part of his family. And I heard a lot of guys talk about RC and about what a great player he was. And just, you know, more than one. And guys that didn't play on his team, the guys that played against him, said he was an outstanding player.
Mark, what about, you know, the fact that he started his career at Dunmore? That school was shuttered, you know, during his playing career, and then
Yeah.
you have to come together with all new players, and again, it didn't seem like he missed a beat.
He didn't miss a beat. You know, Jerry Posey, you mentioned him a while ago. He's talking about RC, and Jerry said when those Dunmore kids come to Hugheskirk, it was just like putting your hand in a glove. They fit right in. You know, no trouble.
But
Like they'd always been there.
big difference, though, Mark. I think then, as of and I'll use now. I can remember growing up, and I'm sure it's even more then. Everybody played with everybody.
Yeah.
In the summertime, that's all you did, because you didn't have all these other things that we do now, as far as the social media and things that we do, games. You played ball every day somewhere. So even though you might not have been in school with somebody, you probably played ball with them all summer. I know my end of my junior year, I played the whole summer with Eddie Rhodes. Seemed like
Yeah.
we were together almost every day, and it made me a much, much better player.
No doubt.
But, you know, I played with, you know, Eddie Rhodes, Tim Harkins, and a lot of guys like that. Seemed like every single day, somewhere.
Yeah.
And usually it wasn't in a gym. It was on a court someplace.
That's when you had your best battles on those outdoor courts.
Yes.
Yeah, the concrete or the asphalt. Yeah, that was some really good days, Jerry.
Jerry, you mentioned the teams that seemed to dominate back during that period of time, and you know I'd forgotten how many times Hugheskirk went to the state tournament. But you know there was a period there where you know like didn't they go 3 or 4 years?
3 out of 4.
3 out of 4 years they'd gone to the state tournament. And were those during the Ben Topmiller days?
They were 48, 49, and 51.
That's what I was thinking, you know, during that time.
What
So
an era that was. What an array
yes.
of players.
And then if it
during
wasn't
that time.
Hugheskirk, it was Central City, you know, going into that time. And Greenville certainly, you know, they had great, they competed, had great athletes and you know, great programs. They couldn't get over that hump because of the other two schools you know,
Right.
that were so good at that point.
But it seemed like they were always right there with them.
Absolutely.
I think one thing, too, the two 50-point games in an era
Well,
where 50
people didn't score points.
Yeah,
Yes.
50 points might not get scored by the team.
That's true.
And he had two 50-point
And
games.
no three-point line.
Three-pointer.
Yep.
You know, again, more maybe a little more remarkable than we think about sometimes.
RC also not only had 2 50-point games, he had probably a handful of 40-point games and several 30-point games. So
Now,
Man could score.
he could score. He could.
The next inductee into the 2020 Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame class is W.C. Marberly. A 1947 graduate of Central City, W.C. Marberly was a player of first for the Golden Tide. He was the first player to score over 1,000 career points and the first to score over 30 points in a single game. Also, he was the first player to earn a Division I athletic scholarship going to Auburn, and the first to be selected for a postseason event, the East-West All-Star Game. Marberly, who had a reputation as one of the toughest players of his era, was part of 116 wins in his CCHS career, which is second all time. He finished with 1,284 points, which ranks 17th all time for the Tide, and twice helped lead his team to the Sweet 16, earning All-State Tournament honors in 1945. Marberly was also an All-State pick in 1945 and was first team selection in 1947. At Auburn, he was a 4-year letter winner from 1948 to 1951 and earned his master's in biology and his PhD in comparative physiology. He became a renowned research professor at Northeast Louisiana University. Offering comments on W.C. Marberly is Tom Wallace, whose uncle Bob Watkins played on the 1945 team with W.C. Marberly. Thanks, Tom.
Well, W.C. Marberly was, without question, the most underrated, underappreciated great player in Central City basketball history. He was truly something special. He cracked the starting lineup early in his freshman season. He was an immediate contributor on that team. The next year, as a sophomore on that 44-45 team, he was a key player on that went to the championship game of the state tournament before losing to Ralph Beard and Louisville Male in that final game. That team went 37-4, and for his efforts, WC was selected to the all-tournament team. The next 2 years, he pretty much had to carry the load offensively. His senior year was the breakout year. That was the year he scored more than 500 points. It was the year that he went beyond the 1,000-point mark, which made him the first Central City player and quite possibly the first Muhlenberg County player to ever do that. and he was the first player to score 30 points in a game, which he did against Louisville St. Xavier. That team went to the state tournament and finished 34 and 4, and he was selected to the Courier Journal first team All-State team. He played 4 years at Auburn. He didn't have a great career there, but he was a solid contributor. But it's what he did after he graduated that was even more impressive. He earned 2 undergraduate degrees. He got a doctorate in comparative physiology, and he became a very successful researcher. And many of the things that he did, researchers are still using today, many of his techniques. So he was named into the who's who of American scientists, which is not a bad thing to be. He developed a place on his back that ended up being cancerous, and for 8 years he battled cancer, multiple skin grafts, multiple surgeries, but in the end, cancer was the one opponent that the Ultimate Warrior simply could not defeat. And he died at the age of 39, and he left behind a wife and 2 young daughters. If anybody deserves to be in the Muhlenberg County Basketball or Athletic Hall of Fame, it's W.C. Marbley. He was truly one of the great ones.
One of the really unique things about W.C. Marbley, again, is his accomplishments beyond athletics. You know, he is a guy that, again, you see his master's and his PhD degrees at Auburn. He went on to actually do some research that led to some development of some of the chemotherapy drugs that later, were used in medical science, still used today. Unfortunately, he also contracted the disease himself. And this guy, with all he accomplished in terms of athletics, with all he accomplished in terms of his career, he died at the age of 39. He had actually contracted some form of cancer, like when he was 31, 32, and there just weren't treatments at the time to take care of him, like we would have today, and died at the age of 39. Incredible. Wonder what he might have done beyond that.
No doubt about it.
The thing, of course, I alluded to Marion Tinsley's commentary on. One thing Tinsley always told me about Marbley was that I guess when Coach Taylor wanted to get the attention of one of the teammates in practice, he would make that teammate guard Moberly during the practice because it was going to be a rough ride for whoever was not giving their all during that time. And Tinsley did not want to be going up against Moberly. So when we say he had one of the reputations, one of the tougher players, I think that was well earned or well acknowledged.
By all accounts, he had some sharp elbows.
Yeah, yeah.
Freddie, a little bit what you said. I remember we started this process 5 years ago. One of the first names that came up was W.C. Marbley. I'll be honest, I had really never heard of him, but then studying and listening, and I know he was a tremendous player, but the education and what he did after basketball is so impressive. And that's with a lot of the guys that we end up bringing up, because to be disciplined enough to be the top of your sport, whatever you're doing, usually leads to being very successful in life.
Yes.
And there's a lot of the guys that are in the Hall of Fame that they have been super successful in life. So it's that little extra step, I think, somehow they learn or take or whatever that propels them to success.
We've talked about that before. The inductees, we're not looking just at what they accomplished in a single sport or in a single program, a single school, that sort of thing, and not just while they're in high school. We're talking about the full body of what their contribution has been to honor Muhlenberg County. And so athletics is connected to all these people, but they certainly had lives beyond athletics, and they contributed in a lot of different ways and have impacted, not just our community, but impacted the state and the nation in some things that they've done. He's certainly one of those individuals.
He's impacted people's lives.
Absolutely.
W.C. Marbley was one of the first Division I scholarship athletes in Muhlenberg County. Right off the top of my head, the third one that I can think of after Pick Hickman and Bob Forsyth. And played at Auburn University and was a star down there. Did a great job on the court.
I guess where does he, as far as the Central City legacy being, but I know I think it was maybe Wallace that came out originally and said that he thought that Marbley, should have been, I guess,
in the first class.
In the first class.
He did, yeah.
And that's the thing, because when we look at these classes, we have to look at the mix. Frankly, how many players from this era, the modern era, get in? how many posthumous inductees get in a particular year. You know, it's not just, hey, here's the list of the 50 greatest of all time, and then we take them in order. It's really about, you know, building the event itself. But I guess where is he on that hierarchy of the great Central City athletes?
Tommy clearly makes plain that he thought the 3 top picks from Central City should have been certainly Corky and W.C. Marbley and then Peck Hickman. Those were his top 3. Now you add into that, you know, the coaching. I mean, how do you leave George Taylor out? How do you leave Delmas Gish out? You know, some players like that, or some people like coaches and players that came later. But Tommy, who has, you know, a really broad base for making decisions and comments relative to sports, those are his top 3.
That's great. That's great.
And another thing, Dean touched a little bit what you said. I know even we are basketball heavy, but all these other sports that we have now and have the opportunities to do, you know, we have to look at those and get those things in. So it's not easy. It's not always easy.
It's not.
We have enough athletes that deserve to be inducted. I think our job is secure for the next 20 years.
Our next inductee for the class of 2020 is Ziggy Sears. John William Ziggy Sears was born in Central City on January 10, 1892, and raised near Cleveland. His father was a coal miner, a trade that Ziggy practiced briefly before attending college and then becoming a professional baseball player. He attended Western Kentucky before becoming a minor league outfielder from 1912 to 1928. Sears, a left-handed hitting outfielder with good speed, most often played left field. From 1918 to 1926, he hit .290 with 277 doubles, 31 triples, and 87 home runs. After his playing career, Sears umpired in the Texas League from 1929 to 1934 and was a National League umpire from 1934 to 1945. Sears was selected to work the 1935 All-Star Game and officiated in the 1938 and 1944 World Series. He was a scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates later in life and appeared as an actor portraying himself in 2 baseball movies, The Babe Ruth Story and The Stratton Story in 1948 and 1949. We're honored to induct Ziggy Sears. And to present some information and accounting on the career of Ziggy Sears is Mr. Mark Bowers.
I'll tell you just a couple of things that you may not know about Ziggy Sears. Ziggy Sears, in his minor league career, had 11 runs batted in 1 game, which is a professional baseball record. And also he had an 81-game streak where he did not make an error. Also, his son Ken Sears played with the New York Yankees back in the 40s. In 1943, they played in the World Series, and Ken played in that series. And if not for an injury, Ziggy Sears would have umpired in that World Series.
The Ziggy Sears induction to me is just kind of an epitome of a discovered story that, you know, frankly, if we hadn't started the Hall of Fame, I don't know that we would know. And Ed DeArmond is the first person that I heard talk about this, and I think he talked about it on your radio show, if I'm remembering right. Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's just such an enjoyable story to find out, and there's a lot out there about Ziggy Sears, and to find that connection to Muhlenberg County, I think is really neat. The fact that and this is during the golden era of baseball too. Mm-hmm. You're talking about the 1930s is when he was
Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth.
I mean, you're talking about that All-Star game, the
Dizzy
people
Dean.
that were on the field during that time. Just
Lou
incredibly
Gehrig.
historic.
You know, you talk about calling him up with all these stats that we've talked about. You look at baseball back then. There was only 16 teams, 8 teams in each league, and so I mean, you had to be really good. I mean, there was a lot of guys ahead of you, man. And
you know, Mark, and studying, since we talking about that, studying him just a little bit, the thing I found is one of the big words that was said about him is how well he was respected in the family of baseball. That's how he ended up becoming an umpire. As you know, with all the stats, he didn't make major leagues, but he made it in a different way. But he was so respected, they wanted him to stay as part of the baseball family.
Right.
And a lot of times your better players or good players who didn't make major leagues, they would put them as umpires and teach them to be an umpire to keep them in the game because they were such good people.
That's right.
Or good baseball people. So
I would love to be able to watch two movies again. They mentioned there that, the Babe Ruth story, then also the Monty Stratton story. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but I remember as a kid watching those movies, black and white, and a 15-inch TV screen, that sort of thing. The Babe Ruth story, to have played his own role in that, it would be phenomenal. And I remember William Bendix played Babe Ruth in that movie. I remember that one. The other one was the Monty Stratton story.
which is a great story in itself.
Oh, James Stewart played Monty Stratton in that story. And he was an up-and-coming pitcher. And in the offseason, these guys had to work. They didn't get those mega bucks and that sort of thing. So he was working like on his farm. He accidentally shot himself in the leg. He lost a leg and came back and played Major League Baseball with a wooden leg. And it was just a phenomenal story. And for him to have been actually on the set making that movie would have been a thrill. So to be a part of that was
Again, that's a testament, though, how much he was respected
Absolutely.
in the baseball family.
Yes, sir.
I think, and correct me, Mark, if I'm wrong, I believe little Ziggy's son did make it to the majors, played for the Yankees.
Ken, now if it hadn't been for an injury to Ziggy, Ziggy was scheduled to umpire in the 1943 World Series, and Ken, playing for the Yankees, played in that World Series. So
Wow.
it would have been father and son, umpire and player in the World Series.
That would have been an interesting night.
It would. Dad, what are you doing? That wasn't a strike.
Oh, but again, just a great story, and proud to have Ziggy in the Hall.
No doubt about it.
Next inductee into the 2020 class, Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame, is Harold Kirkpatrick. Harold Kirkpatrick was born November 23, 1919 in Beech Creek, and is the most accomplished golfer in Muhlenberg County history. He won over 100 golf tournaments during his competitive amateur golf career, including the 1953 and 1954 Kentucky Amateur Championship, and as a member of the Greenville Country Club. He qualified for the 1951 British Senior Amateur and the 1955 British Open. He also served as president of the Kentucky Golf Association in 1959. Kirkpatrick played in all the major tournaments open to an amateur: the Masters, U.S. Open, British Open, U.S. Amateur, and the British Amateur. He was friends with the legendary Bobby Jones, Byron Nelson, and a host of others among the game's greats. He played practice rounds with Ben Hogan at the 1953 U.S. Open at Oakmont, with Babe Saharias for the 1954 World Championships at Tam O'Shanter, and once teamed with Jackie Burke for a match against Hogan and Nelson early in Masters Week at Augusta National. He was inducted into both the Senior Golfers of America Hall of Fame and the Kentucky Golf Hall of Fame. In 2007, the KGA honored him by creating the Harold Kirkpatrick Trophy for low senior scorer in the Kentucky State Amateur Championship. A distinguished military veteran, Kirkpatrick participated in the invasion of Normandy in 1944 and as a member of the U.S. Navy and was awarded 5 Purple Hearts. Sharing comments on behalf of Harold Kirkpatrick is Sammy Levinson, a longtime friend, longtime golfer, and a longtime respecter of Harold Kirkpatrick.
Okay, my name's Sammy Levinson. I'm here to introduce Harold Kirkpatrick to the Muhlenberg County Hall of Fame. He was a mentor of mine, a great golfer, and a great human being. He was former mayor of Greenville, Kentucky, commissioner of mines and minerals back in the late 60s to the mid 70s. I've known Harold all my life. He was like a godfather to me, but he won the Kentucky Amateur in 1954, beating Johnny Owens, who was probably one of the all-time greats in golf in Kentucky, amateur-wise. He was also got beat by Gabe Brewer in the Kentucky Open at E-Town. I can't remember the year, but Harold had a lot of success, probably won over 100 tournaments worldwide. He died at 96 years old. He was just a fabulous guy, would do anything in the world for anybody. And I don't know what to say about him. I've seen him inducted into 4 Hall of Fames. I inducted him into the Kentucky Golf Hall of Fame back in the late 90s. He went into the Castle Heights Military Academy Hall of Fame for basketball. He played there, I'm sure, back in the mid to late 30s. But he also played maybe a year or so basketball at Murray. But his main sport was golf. He loved it, lived it, and did it. Harold actually played in the U.S. Open, the British Open, the U.S. Amateur, and the British Amateur. He also played in our U.S. Senior Amateur at Saucon Valley. He was one of 3 players to have played in the U.S. Amateur and the Senior Amateur at Saucon Valley, and he did that at 67 years old, which is an incredible feat. He also played with Snead, Hogan. He actually was paired with Hogan in a practice round at Oakmont. He played with Babe Zaharias, who you can see in some of the films that I've supplied for the Hall of Fame, shows her hugging him. But he was just played with some of the greats in the game and was just an incredible player. When Harold played in the British Open, he actually led the morning wave, and it was in the Times-Argus that evening that he was leading the British Open after the morning wave, which was incredible.
You know, 5 Purple Hearts ought to get you something.
Incredible.
I mean,
Incredible.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
That alone,
Just that alone.
will get you in, you know.
This guy was known as a gentleman, period. Everybody liked him. You look at the people he rubbed elbows with. Ben Hogan, Bobby Jones,
Byron
Dave
Nelson?
Zaharias, Byron Nelson.
Yeah.
I mean, that you're talking about Mount Rushmore.
That's Mount
Absolutely.
Rushmore. That's Mount Rushmore golf.
For him to have been friendly with all those people. And, you know, he actually, I found out later, talked to Sammy Levinson actually yesterday. And, you know, although he was born, I think, in Logan County, you know, he lived a significant part of his adult life here. He was a businessman involved in the coal industry.
Right.
And he actually, there was a Kirkpatrick mine that I think he owned and operated out going toward Drakesboro, Ebenezer, out in that area. Had, you know, acres of lands and lots of coal and that sort of thing.
They had about 2,000 acres of ground after Beach Creek Coal Company ceased to exist. And of course, almost all of it's been sold now.
Yeah, yep.
But there's still a few acres, not many.
Right.
But you know, my dad grew up with him at Beach Creek. He'd known him all his life, you know.
Just a really good guy, good family. I mean, just when you
yeah.
look at the Kirkpatricks here, you know, Beach Kirkpatrick is a cousin. What was Beach's brother's name? I've lost it all of a sudden.
Raymond? Raymond was daddy.
Yeah, I'm losing, you know, there was Bud Kirkpatrick, Billy Kirk's dad. You know, those were cousins as well. Just a gentleman and absolutely a phenomenal golfer.
No doubt about it.
You know, go ahead, Dean.
I was going to say, you know, I've been a member of the Greenville Country Club since about 1992. When you go in the clubhouse there, you know, from the first day I ever walked in there, they've got the big, you know, wall-sized picture of Harold getting his, you know, winning the amateur. And at the time, you know, and the huge crowd that was there. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not a big deal today, but then, you know, I guess, you know, again, golf's golden era, I think it was a huge deal. And the pride that club had in him. And I had the privilege of meeting him a few times because he would come play in our invitational later in life. And you know, he would be in that senior division. But let me tell you something. Those scores were pretty impressive, and if he'd lost a whole lot on it, you know, he picked it up in other ways. But just you know, you sort of see that when you see these guys that, yeah, maybe they're a little past their prime, but when you see them swing a golf club, in Mr. Kirkpatrick's case, in Corky's case, when you see him hold and pass a basketball, it just looks different in those guys' hands. And I think that the fact that he earned his way to all of these major golf. I mean, you know, back then during that era, a lot of people chose to remain amateurs, you know, because they had successful careers outside of golf. And the purses, frankly, weren't as great in those days as they are today when you think of professional golf. And I think we can safely say that had Harold Kirkpatrick chosen to pursue a professional golf career, his game would have sustained that, and there's no telling what he could have accomplished professionally.
And then think about the equipment he played with compared to what they play with now.
Yeah.
The technology, how much has changed for today compared to what he played. And he shot the same scores then as they shoot now with, you know, I'm going to say inferior equipment, but not the technology they have now. Because I know when I used to play, I would try to get the biggest face and club I could get just to try to hit the ball. And he played with the regular, I guess I'm going to call them smaller clubs. But it was impressive.
Back
Very
in
impressive.
the early 50s, when Harold was on top of his game, you know, you say, well, what had I rather be? Had I rather be a coal operator, or had I rather be a golfer?
And during that time, we were one of the,
at that time,
you know, one of the largest coal producers in the world.
ruled, yeah, no doubt about it.
But just, yeah, tremendous legacy. And you hear guys like, one of our former inductees, Scott Ray, talk about, that legacy and just, again, very worthy inductee and proud to have him as part of the Hall.
Scott made the comment that when we were talking about inducting someone out of the golf profession, he said, Harold Kirkpatrick's the guy that you want in golf, rather than Scott at that time.
Yeah, Scott has always been very open about that, because I know during my time, Scott was the gold standard.
Right.
He's one I thought was the greatest, and he always said, I wasn't good as Harold Kirkpatrick.
Oh, yeah.
So.
He said Harold should have come first. And of course, we talked before, these things are not done in any particular order. We got a lot of folks that deserve to get in, and there are lots of different factors that make up who comes in, what year, that sort of thing. But there was no doubt that at some point Harold Kirkpatrick was coming. So his time has arrived.
People want to say, well, this guy should have been in before this guy, or this is the 5th class that we've done, and everybody in this class could have been in the 1st class.
Sure.
And all 5 previous classes could have all been in the 1st class, every one of them.
Our next inductee for the class of 2020 for the Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame is Marnell Moorman. Born in Central City in 1943, Marnell Moorman was a 1961 graduate of Drakesboro Community High School and recognized as one of the greatest basketball players in school history. He averaged 18.5 points a game as a senior for the Buffaloes, earning both all-district and all-county honors. Moorman scored 770 points in his 2 years of varsity play. He would distinguish himself in the field of education after earning the bachelor's degree from Western Kentucky University in 1965 and his master's from Georgetown. He began his 21-year teaching career in Shelby County in 1965. Moorman was the boys' assistant coach for Shelbyville High School for 10 years from 1965 to 75, and later for Shelby County for 12 years, 1975 to 1987, which included that school's epic run to the 1978 Sweet 16 championship. Moorman was also active in the Kentucky Education Association from 1986 to 1994 and was elected the KEA's first African-American vice president and then president. Moorman was tragically killed in an automobile accident in 1994 while serving his 2nd term as KEA president. The Marnell C. Moorman School was opened in 2019 in Shelby County to honor his contributions to his community and to the Commonwealth. He is also a member of the Western Kentucky University Hall of Distinguished Alumni. A very worthy inductee, Mr. Marnell C. Moorman. And here to offer commentary on Mr. Moorman's excellent career, both on and off the playing court, Mr. Roger Frazier.
Hi, my name's Roger Frazier. I'm giving a testimonial for Marnell Moorman. Marnell Moorman, a native of Central City, was a star athlete at Drakesboro Community High School, graduating in the class of 1961. Reluctant to attend college, he finally agreed to visit Western Kentucky University at the urging of a classmate. He earned his bachelor's degree in education in 1965 and later earned a master's degree from Georgetown College. He moved to Shelbyville, Kentucky to teach biology in Shelby County schools. He was part of the county school system for over 30 years in various administrative and teaching roles, including coaching the basketball team. In 1986, Marnell made history when he became the first African American elected vice president of the Kentucky Education Association, serving for 6 years. In 1992, he was elected president of the Kentucky Education Association, also the first African American to hold that position. On October 14, 1994, Marnell died in a car crash in Wolfe County, Kentucky, as he was traveling to a board meeting of the KEA. Over 1,200 people attended his funeral at Shelby County High School. In 1995, Georgetown College established a scholarship in his name for the qualified African American students who wished to pursue teaching as a profession. 2 years later, Western Kentucky University inducted him into its Hall of Distinguished Alumni. In November of 1999, Clay Street Baptist Church, where he had served as chairman of the trustees, dedicated its new Marnell C. Moorman Senior Family Life Center in his honor. In 2019, the Marnell C. Moorman School opened in Shelbyville, Kentucky. Marnell was a class act and well respected everywhere he went. Muhlenberg County should be proud of his accomplishments. Thank you.
One of the things I think about relative to Marnell Moorman is in looking at Drakesboro Community's basketball program, being able to choose inductees, to represent that great program has been difficult because they had so many good players. You didn't get a 4-year career up there.
You did.
You had to wait until it was your turn to play because there were so many good players in front of you. So Marnell Moorman scores 700 and some odd points, 750 points in 2 years. If he'd been a 4-year starter, that's 1,500 points, that sort of thing, potentially to be there. But he couldn't get there because of the grades in front of him. So there's no telling how many people would have had phenomenal careers there in terms of points scored that we'll never know about because they simply didn't get the opportunity to be able, to play. And so he's certainly one of those guys.
Talking about guys like L.W. Harbin and Ronald Dunn and Parker. Can't think of the Parker guy's first name, but guys like that, only played 2 years, and maybe part of another one, but didn't score enough points to get 1,000. Only
Leroy Willis.
Leroy Willis was the only one I've come across that scored over 1,000, 1,520, I think it was. But Kilroy, he was a great one and undisputedly the best player ever. But
well, it gets back to the point too that Dean mentioned earlier. Even statistics during that time were difficult, and we can't find all the records that are there to be able to know exactly what goes on with all those guys. So a number of factors figure into that.
And also back then, community didn't play that many games. They didn't play quite as many games as the other county schools played. They may have played 20 to 25 games a year. Sometimes, some years they would play more, but most of the time it was 20 to 25 games.
Right.
In the dynamic, Kilroy was our first inductee from Drakesboro Community, and the fact that, we did have the segregated era and then the era after desegregation, and again, to go back, and in many cases, we'll talk to folks in the community about, hey, who is the next great player we need to honor, the great coach, what have you. And I think, Marnell, what he accomplished in school, on the court, by reputation, more so than the statistical things we were able to bring up, was impressive. But what he accomplished afterwards,
oh my gosh,
a historic figure in Kentucky education, and which has been well documented. And again, that school that sits up in Shelby County right now is a great testament to that. One thing I will mention, this is another kind of connection, you could say, to the history of Muhlenberg County basketball. In the plaque inscription, it does mention the fact that Moorman coached on that 1978 Rockets team.
Charles Hurt.
With Charles Hurt. Who did they play in the first round that year? They played Apollo.
Who had beat Drakesboro.
Who had beaten Drakesboro. Right. Apollo was the first undefeated team to go to the Sweet 16, as I understand it. And they played Drakesboro in that great 78 championship game. Drakesboro undefeated. So whoever came out of that third region was going to be the first, we hated that it wasn't us, but boy, they ran into a buzzsaw in that Shelby County team.
The first and only regional tournament, you had 2 undefeated teams in the finals.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm. What a game that was.
Oh, what
Y'all
great
didn't see
game.
it? Wow. The turning point was when Eddie Rose got his 4th foul. And it was a 3-point game at that time. Eddie went out, and when he came back in, it was a 13-point game. So it kind of went downhill from there. Mm-hmm. Through this year, we've had 51 individuals and 9 teams inducted into the Muhlenberg County Hall of Fame. We've had 44 males and 7 females. The 9 teams represented by 6 schools and 1 Muhlenberg County All-Star team, and that being the 1971 14, 15-year-old Babe Ruth team. 2 from Central City and 2 from Muhlenberg North, 1 from Muhlenberg Central, one from Muhlenberg South, one from Greenville, one from Hugheskirk, and the one all-star team. The teams represent 4 different sports. 4 from boys basketball, 2 from girls basketball, 2 from baseball, 1 from cross country. The individuals represent 12 different schools. And that does not include Mr. Alexander from Gus and Mr. Ziggy Sears from Cleeton or Harold Kirkpatrick from Beech Creek. Some of those individuals were only counted for 2 different schools. Examples off the top of my head are Bogus and McElwain, because Bogus, Renee Bogus played tennis for Central City and Muhlenberg North, and of course R.C. McElwain for Dunmore and Hugheskirk. Here are the breakdowns for the individuals by schools: 13 from Central City, 8 from Greenville, 8 from Muhlenberg North, 6 from Hugheskirk, 4 from Drakesboro, 3 from Muhlenberg Central, 2 from South, 2 from Bremen, 2 from Dunmore, Graham, Drakesboro Community, and 1 from Muhlenberg County. These individuals stretch across 18 areas of sports, and with, again, some representing more than one sport. Here are the breakdowns. Boys basketball player, 23 individuals. Boys basketball coach, 12. Baseball players, 9. Girls basketball players, 5 of those. 3 football players. Boys cross country and track, 2. Basketball officiating, 2. Baseball coaching, 2. 2 golfers, 1 in cheerleading. Girls basketball coach, 1. Girls cross country, 1. Football coach, 1. Baseball umpire, 1. Girls tennis, 1. Horse racing, 1. Swimming, 1. And broadcasting, 1.
As already mentioned, this is our 5th class in terms of induction in Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame. This year is unique in that since we had been through the pandemic last year, we could not have an in-person induction. And so we're using this year in order to do some catch-up on people that needed to be in the Hall of Fame, deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, but simply could not make it happen in previous years for different reasons. So this year we were unique in that we are doing a virtual rather than in-person induction. And it let us be able to add a number of people who are no longer with us. So as you probably have noticed, this year's class is totally posthumous. In past years, we've had a mixture of people who could be in attendance and those who could not, those who had family members that could attend and those who could not. But this year, in an attempt to be able to continue this great tradition of inducting into our Hall of Fame each year, we wanted to do this virtual, posthumous class, and we are certainly proud of the inductions that have been named today. Everybody's so much deserving to be a part of this Hall of Fame, and we trust that as you view this through YouTube or other means in the days to come, that you will enjoy what's taking place this year for the 2020 Muhlenberg County Athletic Hall of Fame induction.